When I was 22 and Jungkook was 25, he gave me a silver necklace with a tiny diamond pendant. It was our first anniversary. I'd just graduated and moved to Seoul to pursue my career. He was the CEO of an investment firm. We lived together but didn't announce that we were in a relationship. "We can't make this public," Jungkook would say. "It will hurt business. Everyone will think you're a gold digger. People might say you only got your job because of who I am." I wasn't sure if he was lying to me or if he was so insecure that he genuinely believed all those things. Our relationship was hidden. Only our best friends and family knew. But when he gave me the necklace, he told me that he loved me more than anything in the world. He said that I made him a better person, that I deserved the world, and he would do anything to give it to me. That day, we took a trip to Jeju Island. We went hiking, ate black pork, saw waterfalls, and watched the sunset. We kissed on the beach, our fingers intertwined with one another. I was so in love with him, it hurt. But 2 years later, my heart no longer felt that way, and so I ended it. I told him to move out and that I needed time, to be alone. He cried, screamed at me, begged me for another chance, but I didn't budge. "It's over," I said. He looked at me in a way that I had never seen before, like his whole world was ending. And then he left. I cried for a while, but mostly out of exhaustion. We hadn't been happy for a long time, and I'd known it for months. He would barely talk to me. We'd fight about everything. The only good moments were when we had sex. Those moments reminded me of why I'd fallen in love with him in the first place. But even the sex wasn't enough to make me stay. I was miserable. I knew I needed to move on. A few weeks after he moved out, he called me. "Can I see you?" he asked. His voice was deep, crackly. I could tell that he'd been crying. I hesitated but agreed to meet him for coffee. He arrived before I did. He wore jeans, sneakers, and a denim jacket. His hair was messy, his eyes bloodshot. "I've missed you so much," he said as soon as I sat down. I didn't say anything. I just stared at him. He looked like a different person. His skin was pale, his face gaunt. His eyes were so dark and hollow that I couldn't see the green in them anymore. "You look awful," I blurted out. He laughed, but it sounded more like a sob. "I'm so sorry," he said. "I was such an idiot. I love you. I want to spend the rest of my life with you." He reached for my hand. His fingers were cold. I looked at him. "What are you talking about?" I said. "We should make our relationship public. Everyone should know that you're my girlfriend. I'm sorry it took me so long to figure that out. You want to make us public?" He nodded. A few tears rolled down his cheeks. "Yes," he said. I looked away. "I don't believe you," I said. "You've said so many things over the years that you never follow through with." "Not this time," he said. "This time it's real. I can't do this without you." I looked back at him. I wanted to believe that he meant it, but I couldn't. He'd hurt me so many times. I didn't think I could take any more of his lies. Even if he meant it now, what would happen a few months or years from now? Would he go back to how he used to be? Would we go back to not talking and fighting? "I need to think," I said. "Okay," he said, "but you have to promise me something." "Anything," he said, his voice low. "Promise me you'll think about what's good for you, not what you think will make me happy." He took a deep breath. "I promise," he said, "and I promise I'll call you in a few days with something important." "What is it?" I asked. "I can't tell you now," he said. "You have to wait." He stood up and kissed my forehead. I let him. I couldn't help but feel a rush of happiness. I hadn't gotten a kiss on the forehead in a long time, and it reminded me of the past, of when we were happy, of when he was my entire world and I his. We didn't say much after that. He walked me out of the cafe and hailed a cab for me. I got into the taxi and looked at him before shutting the door. I didn't know what he was going to say, but he had already said too much. I knew that if he told me anything, I would do anything for him, because he was still the one I loved most. He was the one that made my heart feel like it would burst into a million pieces if I didn't see him. But I still wasn't sure if that was enough to trust him again. And so I waited for him to call and tell me whatever it was he wanted to say. And while I waited, I thought. I thought about the times we were together, the laughter, the tears, the fights, the making up, the sex, the late night talks, the good meals, the bad mornings. I thought about all of it, every moment I'd shared with him, the good ones, the bad ones, the ones that made me feel like I was in heaven, and the ones that made me want to kill myself. I thought about all the good things, but mostly the bad, the worst of it all. The times he'd said the most awful things to me, and the times I'd done the same to him. I thought about those moments because it was those moments that made me doubt if we were really compatible. And then I thought about what I would do if he said what I wanted him to say. If he said he wanted to move back in with me, what would I do? Would I let him? Would I want him back? And so that's why I didn't answer when he called that night. I didn't have an answer yet. And I didn't want to lie and tell him to come back if I wasn't sure. I needed more time to think. And so that's what I did. I kept thinking, kept waiting, kept hoping for something better. I'd given him so much of my time. He owed me some of his. And so that's all I could do, keep thinking and hoping. Hoping that he would give me something new to hold on to. Something that would make me believe again. Something that would make me feel like my heart was home. And so I didn't go looking for him that night. I didn't call his friends to ask where he was or what he was doing. I just stayed in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering if we had a future together. But a few minutes later, there was a knock on the door. I hesitated for a moment, but then got up and looked through the peephole. And that's when I saw him. Standing outside my door, holding a bouquet of white flowers and wearing the same clothes he'd worn earlier. He had that same look in his eyes, the one where it seemed like he wanted to eat me alive. "Let me in," he said. And so I did. He handed me the flowers and kissed me before I could say anything. "I don't care if you still have feelings for me," he said. "All I know is that I want to spend every single day I have left with you. I love you more than you'll ever know." I didn't answer him then. I let him lead me to the couch and kissed said anything, he murmured. I lifted my head and looked at him. I'm trying to decide what I want, I said. I want you back, he said. His voice was still deep and husky, but there was an edge of uncertainty to it. I know, I said. And what do you want? I didn't answer that. Not then, because I still wasn't sure. He kissed my forehead again. Just be with me tonight, he said. That's all I'm asking. I am, I said. You know what I mean. I did. I did. Are you going to make our relationship public now? He nodded. I have a meeting with my assistant tomorrow, he said, to talk about how to do it. That's what you wanted to tell me earlier? Yes, he said. I still don't know, I said. If you can do it. If you really. I felt it in my heart that he was sincere, that we could be together, that we could make it work again. But I knew that I couldn't just decide. Not then. Not yet. Because even though it felt good, even though I loved him, I still needed more time to think and to know for sure. And so, that was what I told him after we came and cleaned ourselves up, after we were dressed again and sitting on the couch, holding hands. I need more time, I said. How much? I don't know yet. He nodded and kissed my forehead again. He looked sad, but he also looked like he understood. And maybe he did, because he knew me better than anyone else. But also, maybe he knew because he felt the same way. Maybe he wanted to make sure too. Maybe he also needed more time to figure out if we could work this time around. I love you so much, I said. I love you too, he said. His voice was still low and husky. His hair was still messy. His eyes were still dark and deep. He looked the same, but also different. He seemed more like himself than he had in a long time, like he was finally doing what was right for him, like he was finally listening to his heart. And so we stayed on the couch that night and talked about our future, about what we wanted, about our fears, about everything that had driven us apart, and everything that had brought us back together again. We talked until morning, until the sun was rising high over the city and the sky was orange, and then we went to bed again, holding hands and looking into each other's eyes. And the next day, JUNG KOOK made our relationship public. It was all over the news, the internet, the magazines. I got a few texts from people that I knew, asking what happened, why JUNG KOOK and I were suddenly a couple when we weren't before. But no one really asked the questions I wanted them to ask, like why we hadn't made it public before, why he'd made me a secret, why I'd stayed. No one asked me those things, and maybe it was better that way. Maybe it was better for me to figure that out on my own, instead of having other people's opinions. Maybe I needed more time to really figure out what it all meant. Maybe I needed more time to understand that even though we were out in the open now, there were still going to be moments when we would fight and hate each other, moments when we would make each other cry, moments when we wouldn't talk for hours, days, maybe even weeks. Maybe we would break up again. Maybe we wouldn't. But for now, for this moment, we were together and we were happy. And that was all I could really ask for. A moment of happiness, of knowing that I was exactly where I was supposed to be, with the one person that had captured my heart, with JUNG KOOK, my love, my home, my everything. And in the end, that's what mattered more than anything else. Not what we'd gone through to get here, not the pain or the hurt, not any of it, but rather what it was going to lead us to, where it would take us next, and who it would help us become, as individuals and as a couple. And maybe that was what we'd been missing the entire time. Maybe we hadn't known how to be ourselves together. Maybe we'd gotten lost along the way and didn't know how to find ourselves again. But now that we were here, now that we were out in the world again, now we had a chance to figure it out, to find ourselves again, to make sure that this time we got it right. This time we did it better. This time we found forever. This time our hearts stayed home, with each other. And maybe, just maybe, this time it would all be enough. Maybe this time everything would be just enough for us to live happily ever after. Just enough for us to find forever. Just enough for us to never let each other go. Not ever again. Not even for a moment. Not even once. Never ever again.